So where do we want to place other types of lights? And again, it depends what they are and what the purpose is. So here's a strip light. This is a strip softbox. Love using these. If I'm doing any kind of sports lighting, I will go for this. But this is the primary light that I use for something called a kicker, sometimes called separation light. Think of it as a combination hair light, separation. It will create a light part opposite where your main light is to separate out from the background. Again, for this, it'll be about generally the same height as the main. You might bring it up or down depending on if you're doing just a headshot or 3/4 or a full length. But in general, this is going to be feathered again for me behind the subject. Rather than in front of them, I'll actually have it pointing behind them because I don't want it to put a lot of light here. I just want it to put a little rim light on it. And again, we'll see this during the videos. So let's change out off of our softbox and go to something called an Octa, and this is a small Octa. This is a 90 centimeter Octa. An Octa is like a softbox. Well, it is a softbox. The difference is it's got 8 sides instead of being a rectangle or a square. They operate very similarly. They cast very similar light patterns. The biggest difference is that an Octa is going to create what's going to look to the viewer as a round catch light on the eye, something that's going to more simulate the sun. Some people love Octus, some people don't use them at all. One half dozen another. What I do like using Octus for is for something called clamshell lighting. We'll get to that later. And they can create a very nice light, particularly when used above, close to the subject. Again, we'll explore that later. There are lots of different sizes and shapes of softboxes and Octus. Here's basically a 24-inch square. This is great, got great headshot light shaper, and it's very small. Again, I'll generally treat it slightly, maybe slightly above, coming down. We'll put this to use when we do some shooting. And not to ignore a couple of the very basics, umbrellas. Now, umbrellas get no respect, but umbrellas are very handy. If you're shooting a small group, umbrellas very well might be the way to go. Very simple to use. There's 2 basic kinds. There's a reflective and there's a shoot-through. This is a reflective umbrella with a white interior. Generally with studio lights, I like to use white. It's a little less specular. So if somebody's got, maybe somebody's sweating a little bit, there's a little shine, it won't be quite as shiny as a silver would be. Silver is good if you need to put out a heck of a lot of light because it is the most reflective. If you're close enough though, it will actually look silvery on a face. I generally with studio lights prefer white, but if you need to illuminate a big group or from a far distance away, silver's the way to go. Now, both in studio and outdoors, I love using shoot-through umbrellas. These things are wonderful. Great tool, inexpensive tool. Everybody should have shoot-throughs because they are so versatile. If you're using them outside, say you're running your strobes outside, a shoot-through is a nice big softbox, actually very similar to what an Octa does. And outside, well, you don't care. The light's going to fade off. It's not going to illuminate the background. In the studio, understand that a shoot-through is going to send light everywhere. If you don't mind lights going onto your background, you can still use it. Again, great for small group portraits. Also, both the reflective and the shoot-through umbrellas create a nice round catch light in the eye, similar to the sun. So because of that, you want them up. You want them up so that that catch light is going to end 10 o'clock, hopefully 10 o'clock or so on the clock face in the eye. No less than 9, but really try to go for 10 because that's how we see people. We expect the sun or overhead lights to be up here and they're going to create a light up on top. If you have a round light coming from the bottom, that's going to look strange. By the way, strange is not necessarily bad, but if you learn the rules, then you can break them. But understand how to do it the right way, the conventional way first, and then by all means experiment. Let's take a look at some hard reflectors. Hard reflectors create different kinds of light. From the very basic, here's just a very basic 7-inch reflector. And this is something that you would use in concert with an umbrella to keep the light from the strobe head going everywhere. If you want to narrow it, as we just talked about, I've got a grid here, and this just fits right into the reflector. Just fits right in the reflector, and you can see, I can see through it, and as soon as you turn it to the side, I disappear. Again, what this does is it narrows the beam of the light coming out of the reflector. Even though this is fairly small, the light's going to go out fairly broadly. By putting in a grid inside your reflector, that narrows the light down. And the reflectors come in different numbers. The finer the grid, the more narrow the beam will be. Small reflectors are good for just throwing a splash of light. They're great for being on the background. They're great for hair lights. If you want to get something a little more dramatic, I'm a big fan of deep reflectors. This is a 9-inch deep reflector, and what these do is create something that is akin to a street light. You've got a light up top, it's putting that kind of beam of light down. You can also use this in concert with other lights. Maybe I'm using a big softbox and I want to accentuate just the face. This is an option. I could have this coming from above, creates a perfectly round light. You can get grids for these too that will really keep it narrow and it becomes like a spotlight. So if you're going for more of a theatrical look, that's a great choice. This is called an accent tube. Sometimes it's called the snoot. And what this does is it takes the long reflector to the extreme. In fact, they even come more narrow than this. This one actually has a grid built into it to really keep the light narrow. So if I had somebody with, maybe particularly with very dark hair, and I want to use a hair light, and all I want is a little light, a little sheen on the back of the head opposite the mane, I would put this on my light so that it is shining. And with the combination of the narrow tube here and the grid in here, it's going to create a very small light that can be very focused. And we'll explore that as well. Right now I'm just showing you kind of where to put these things and what they do. Last one I'll talk about is the beauty dish. Everybody wants a beauty dish. This is actually a pretty big one. This is a really wonderful beauty dish. The size really helps because a smaller beauty dish is a little harder to work with. Now everyone runs out and buys a beauty dish, I think because they hear the word beauty, so it's going to make my portraits beautiful. This may be the most difficult light shaper to use because it is very unforgiving because of the direction of the light, as are, by the way, if you're using one of these deep reflectors on someone. Because the light is very directional, if this person's skin has any issues, they're going to show, they're going to be magnified. So you have to be careful. The thing about a beauty dish is it creates a round catch light in the eye, perfectly round with a dark circle in the middle. It's kind of otherworldly. It's not a natural looking light, but it's very cool. The one thing about a beauty dish is your subject does need to be pretty much looking at it or pretty close to looking at it. Again, we're expecting the light, the catch light, to be up at 10 o'clock or so. So this reflector needs to be up and above. And I think you'll find you're going to get the best results when your subject's looking at it or just off of right at it. In fact, putting it right overhead, right in front of the subject, is very popular, or slightly off to one side, allows them to look into the light. It evenly lights the face, which is much more forgiving than if you're coming from the side. And it creates that really cool round catch light in the eyes. So hard reflector, in general, hard reflectors, if they're lighting the face, are going to be up higher coming down, 30 to 45 degrees. Soft boxes, if they're rectangular, are going to generally be lower, with the studio strobe itself pretty close to even to the face, because again, they're simulating a window. Octus, you can use any way you want. They can be above, they can be straight on, whatever. So there's kind of an overview. Now that's a little bit theoretical. You really need to put them into use. Translating it into using actual portraits does require a little bit of practice, a little bit of patience. If you can visualize what you want your final portrait to look like, it'll help you choose your light shaper and where it needs to be positioned, which is our next step. So, you know what? I think it's time to get into the studio and start shooting some portraits. I'll see you there.